Senator Roberts.
Thank you. One Nation strongly opposes the Identity Verification Services Bill 2023. Here's why. The Albanese government's great mate, BlackRock boss Larry Fink, and predatory billionaires at the World Economic Forum are fond of the phrase, "You will own nothing and be happy." What they really mean is they will own everything and you will comply. Why would people voluntarily enslave themselves, give up their homes, cars, household goods and lose the right to travel freely, I hear you ask? The answer is that people will not be given a choice. They will be coerced, forced into it. That's the purpose of this government's triad of tyranny. Firstly, the Identity Verification Services Bill 2023, to normalise and allow the use of biometric data to locate and track citizens. Secondly, the Digital Identity Bill 2023, to force every Australian into having a digital ID. Thirdly, the Misinformation and Disinformation Bill 2023, which ensures media and social media only carries government-sanctioned opinions. And so the government is exempted and can be free to spread misinformation or disinformation. Biometric data is your face turned into a data file based on physical characteristics. It allows a faster and more accurate identification. They will capture your face. The National Driver's Licence Database, is being upgraded to become the repository of your master identification record, which is already used to establish your identity with a paper check and now with a facial scan. Australians do not need to consent in a meaningful manner. The bill currently uses the word consent without definition. Consent can be implied. Here's an example. If a person sees a video of themselves on a self-checkout at the supermarket and uses the checkout anyway, it's considered implied consent. The government has accepted implied consent is no consent at all and upgraded consent in their amendment on sheet UD 100 to explicit consent. That isn't good enough either. Explicit consent can be provided as a blanket consent. An example would be MasterCard changing their terms and conditions to allow for facial recognition whenever their card is used. Once the card owner gets the email saying, "We have updated our terms and conditions, click here to approve," and people click here without recording it, without reading it, one of those new terms could be permission for facial recognition. Did you give consent? No. Banks currently record the image of anyone using the ATM and then use that in the case of a fraudulent transaction. Banks will update their terms and conditions to give themselves the right to run your biometric verification on each occasion before allowing access to your account. Refusing the new permission gives your bank or card company the right to refuse service. It's that simple. Blackmail. This is why the government suggesting a digital ID or biometric data check will be voluntary is a complete lie. It's compulsory because not agreeing means you lose your bank account or payment card or service. Just as those voluntary COVID injections were compulsory if you wanted to keep your job, your house and feed your family. I foreshadow an amendment in the committee stage on sheet 2327 to change the definition of explicit to active, meaning on each occasion your face is scanned. In other words, when they scan your face, they ask permission before they scan it and make sure they get your permission. Each time, active consent. This should be supported because the government already says Australians will have to consent to their biometric data being used. Unless, of course, that was misinformation. This bill does not offer a direct link between the authentication action at a checkout, office, airport, etc., and the master file. A government hub receives the request and polls the master file, meaning only the government has access to the master file, only the government, which seems to look acceptable. Yet it means there's a master file with 17 million records containing name, address, telephone, date of birth, driver's licence number, passport number and a biometric identification file, all sitting in the same database. All the information necessary to steal someone's ID and impersonate them online. A hacker's paradise. Robodebt proved our bureaucrats are incapable of even a simple one-to-one database match, and now they're being trusted to pull this off. It's impossible without a high level of compulsion and without completely ignoring victims of software or data matching errors. If the lookup fails, then your purchase, travel, document signing or whatever other use fails. If the purchase was for petrol, your family could be stranded late at night. Stranded. We might as well start the Royal Commission now. Downstream from big government database are what I call intermediaries, or entities with participating agreements. There are 20 of these so far. Their role is to take a request for authentication from a bank or card processor, solicitor, real estate agent, airline, anyone needing you to prove who you are who you say you are, and submit that to the National Driver's Licence Database Hub to run past the master database. In the original bill, there were no effective checks and balances on those businesses. The government's amendment of its own bill has added a few to ensure that intermediaries must delete data received as part of the verification process. Thank you, Minister Gallagher. That, taken together with my amendment to make the level of consent clear, takes some of the potential abuse out of the bill. Some. A clear privacy statement would have helped. The government have promised they will do that later. There are trust issues around that promise. Questions remain around the New South Wales government comment that this bill will allow them to verify every person detected driving a car past a surveillance camera has a driver's licence. Every person. The only way this can be achieved is if every driver is scanned every time they pass a detection camera and their image is compared to the national database. Does this mean those cameras going up around Australia at just the right height to scan the driver's face? And will the cameras be used to scan and verify your identity each time you pass one? Yes, it does. Before they work out who you are and whether you have a licence, they have to scan and verify your biometrics. It's the only explanation for the New South Wales government's comment. For those listening to this with incredulity, can I remind you this is exactly the system now in place in London with Lord Mayor Khan's ULEZ, ultra-low emission zone, and Birmingham and Manchester and other cities in Britain. It's really the World Economic Forum's 15-minute cities happening right now. Residents are locked into their zone and can only leave a certain number of times a year. This is happening in Britain. That depends on the make and model of the car you drive. If you drive a car that they don't like, you can't move. Rich people who can afford electric cars can, of course, come and go as they please. Everyday citizens are locked in, or when they leave, the cameras detect them leaving and fine them on the spot. £180 a week for leaving over 7 days. In Britain now. Already it's raised hundreds of millions of pounds because people will pay for freedom. Look it up. Don't trust me, just look it up. Fines for not registering with the system and fines for breaching the 15-minute limits. It's a virtual offence, like an electric dog collar. And the foundation for a social credit system to control people's lives. Completely control. So don't tell me this is a conspiracy theory. It's real and it's happening now in our mother country. Cash is necessary to ensure these measures are ameliorated as much as possible, which is why the globalist wing of the Liberal Party tried to ban cash in the last parliament, which One Nation defeated. It should be obvious that predatory, parasitic billionaires and their lackeys in the Labor and Liberal Party, some of their lackeys, are getting their ducks in a row because they want to be ready for the full implementation of their globalist masters' control agenda. Exactly as they promised. It's not like they're hiding any of this. When they tell us what they're going to do, listen. Remember, this government's triad of tyranny already is entered into Parliament. The Identity Verification Services Bill 2023 to normalise and allow the use of biometric data to locate and track citizens. Here it is. The Digital Identity Bill 2023 to force every Australian into having a digital ID. The Misinformation and Disinformation Bill 2023, which ensures media and social media only carries government-sanctioned opinions, and the government is exempted. I implore the Senate to vote against this bill and to reject this bill. This is the first of 3 bills necessary to turn Australia into the world's first World Economic Forum digital prison.
Authorised Malcolm Roberts, Brisbane.